The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello people of Norfolk, get ready for another 5 episodes this week. We've done with Broadland for now, we saw those last week. We're now starting another new district of Norfolk this week. Welcome to the Broads. This is Broadland, and we're beginning with quite a big village and one that's got a very unusual church. Have a look at this. Can you see how thin that tower is? You don't see them quite that narrow, do you, most of the time? Well, that church tower belongs to a rather large village called Spixworth. Spixworth, Spix Farm. Hello out there, Broadlanders. For the first time on TVI, we're on the Norfolk Broads, although we won't be seeing any narrowboats in this one. To kick off the series, we're in a big village called Spixworth, which sits about 4 miles north of Norwich. Much of what you see here was once part of a huge estate, later sold off and turned into housing. The result is a village that mixes old Norfolk history with a very modern suburban layout. The name Spixworth is usually linked to Old English roots, thought to mean something like Spix Farm. Spixworth appears in the Domesday Book with just 17 households, marking it as a small Saxon settlement. Later it passed through Norman hands, then the Bardolph family, and eventually the Peck family, who built a grand hall in 1607. The Long family then took over in 1693 and held the estate until 1950. After the hall was demolished in 1952, the land was sold and the village expanded fast into the suburban place we see now. With the hall gone, it's now the housing estates that best define this. We now have rows of semis, cul-de-sacs and later infill plots that turned a tiny rural place into a commuter base for Norwich. They're the reason Spixworth feels large, lived in and full of everyday movement. They're the backdrop to almost everything here. Even with all that housing, Spixworth still has several standout spots. St Peter's Church sits at the historic core with its unusual southwest tower and its early medieval stonework. The co-op, the schools and the Long Arms pub all anchor daily life too. Spixworth Hall once carried some colourful tales. People spoke of a ghostly night watchman walking the grounds after dark. Others mentioned a phantom horse-drawn hearse that was said to appear at midnight. There was even a story about Sir William Peck's soul being bricked into an alcove. The Peck family sure left their mark early on, with William serving as both High Sheriff of Norfolk and Mayor of Norwich. The Long family followed, and in 1920 Maud and Reginald Gurney of Gurney's Bank lived at the hall too. Recent years have brought practical issues rather than dramatic ones. Greg's Meadow faced a Japanese knotweed outbreak in 2025, forcing fencing and specialist treatment. The Spixworth Motel became emergency accommodation for local councils, reflecting wider housing pressures. Meanwhile, new green spaces like Maisie's Meadow have been planted with wildflowers and young trees, giving the parish fresh outdoor areas. Today, most residents work in Norwich, using Spixworth as a base, but what a village they have to call home. Let's see it.
Hello Broadland. Today in Spixworth I have a few things to tell you about. I'll be on the church, the motel and the pub, plus I'll also be filling you all in about Spixworth Hall, which no longer stands. See you in a mo.
To begin with here, we're driving through an area of modern housing to the south of the main village street. I'm using this to highlight a point. Spixworth is bloody big. It hasn't always been that way though. The older core sits tight around the church, but there's not much to it. You see, Spixworth used to be part of a huge estate and all this was land that belonged to it. There were only 52 people living here in 1845. These days there's several thousand. The real change came once the big estate broke up in the mid-1900s. Street after street of post-war homes began to appear, each one pulling Spixworth a little further away from its old rural life. The 1950s and 1960s brought long runs of semi-detached houses, the kind built for young families who wanted a quieter base while still being close to Norwich. Spixworth has that classic commuter belt look and it still defines big chunks of the village today. Newer streets have since appeared, including ones from the 70s, 80s, 90s and the 2000s where the layout gets curvier and the cul-de-sacs start to multiply. It's these areas which feel like they were designed around cars from the start. Everything loops and bends and the houses sit in tidy clusters. Spixworth basically grew by stretching outwards one estate at a time. With all that being said, Spixworth should not immediately be considered a modern village. There is a history to this place which stretches far back into the past, way before any of these streets were even thought of, and long before the modern Norwich commuters came along. Well, that was interesting, wasn't it? Driving around that housing estate with the sun shining through the trees and whatnot. Hope you could see everything. Sun glare this morning's quite bad. Hey, we shouldn't complain about that. It means it's going to be a nice day. And by default, it means we're going to have a nice walk around this village as well. So we're going to start in the churchyard. I've driven up to the church, which you saw in the intro, with its very strange tower. Let's talk about this to start with.
St Peter's Church will start us off properly here. This goes right back to the late 1100s. It's a small, flint building with simple stone edges and mixes old Norman work with later styles. Nothing feels over the top though. It's just a solid old church with a long past and a lot to talk about. The tower is the bit everyone remembers. It's only 45 feet tall, but it sits in a funny spot in the southwest corner, almost like it was squeezed in. It has no buttresses at all, so it looks slim and straight, almost like a pencil stuck in the ground. The lower part is the oldest bit of the whole place, and the red brick top was added later in the 1400s. Most of the main building comes from the early 1300s. The nave and the chancel have those flowing window shapes from that time. In the 1400s, the south aisle and arcade were added. We even know who helped pay for it, because two wills from 1499 and 1504 mention money left for the work. It is nice when details like that survive. Inside, the church has a few things that stand out. There's a carved rood screen that feels older than it looks, even though it was put in during the second half of the 20th century. There is also a small window on the southern side with St. Peter holding the keys. That window was added to honour people who died in the two world wars. And then there are the bells, which might be some of the oldest in Norfolk, with one said to date from around 1350. In spring, the churchyard fills with snowdrops and bluebells, and it feels like the whole place wakes up.
So we're on the path here that runs up to the church and down into the village in the other direction. Behind the camera there's a load of trees at the moment, and those trees are on the edge of some former parkland that belonged to Spixworth Hall. Now the hall is no longer standing. It was by far the greatest sort of mansion type house around here for some distance actually, but it's not there anymore. We'll talk about Spixworth Hall at the end of this episode because I want to concentrate on the village first. And our first sort of task, if you like, from the church is to make our way to Ivy Road. There's a road off to the left called Ivy Road, and on there's a couple of schools. There are two schools in Spixworth and they're not far away from each other. This here is Spixworth Infant School on Ivy Road and looks after children aged 4 to 7. It's part of the Care Federation, working closely with Woodland View Junior School just up the road. The school follows a curriculum built around cross-school standards, so pupils get the same strong start as others in the Federation. The last full Ofsted inspection rated this school as good, and the report picked out strong attendance and strong personal development. And here we have Woodland View Junior School, also on Ivy Road. This one has grown in stages over the years. The first part of the school went up in 1969, built for a village that was getting bigger and bigger. Then, in 1976, a 6-classroom extension was added to fit more pupils. In 2007 came the biggest change when the school reorganised so it worked only as a junior school for ages 7 to 11. Then, in 2024, it officially joined with Spixworth Infant School under the Care Federation. Inside the building, there's a lot packed into one site. As well as those 6 classrooms, there's a music and a drama room, and even an art room. Outside, there are courts for netball, tennis, korfball and basketball. The school sits next to some local woods, which is, by the way, how it got its name. This is Greg's Meadow, a 2-acre green space gifted to the parish council in 1996 by the Mills family in memory of their youngest son, presumably called Greg. It sits on land with a high water table, so it was never suited for building. Instead, it works well as a spot for wildlife, dog walking and simple outdoor time. People use it for short strolls, fresh air and a bit of space. The meadow has had a tough patch recently. In early 2025, Japanese knotweed was found in part of the picnic area, and that changed things. The plant spreads quickly and can cause real damage, so the council fenced off the affected section to keep people away. The knotweed problem is not small. The plant can grow up to 8 feet tall and spread roots up to 28 feet across. A specialist treatment plan is now in place. In terms of facilities, Spixworth does rather well for itself. Here we have the local co-op which sits on Crostwick Lane and has been part of village life since the area grew after World War II. It's run by the East of England Cooperative Society, which began in 1861 in Colchester. Although founded in Essex, Norfolk soon had its own branch of the movement. One of its best known ideas is the Sourced Locally range, which supports farmers and producers from the region. The Spixworth branch follows that same approach. It stocks local goods, supports local causes, and keeps things straightforward for shoppers. It is a modern shop, but those old values are still there. You'll notice this is a fairly new shop. There were once much older buildings here at one time, which were cleared to make room for this. Religiously, the church is the main worship space the village has, but there's also this small chapel on Godfrey Road, designed to house the Norfolk Christadelphians. They've been here since January 2025, when they left their old base in Norwich and came out to this quieter residential spot. The Christadelphians in Norfolk have a long past. Their earliest activity in the region goes back to 1858, and the Norwich Ecclesia was formally established in 1887. They follow a Bible-based approach and hold non-Trinitarian beliefs. Over the years, the group has met in different places, but the aim has always been the same: to read, learn, and meet together in a calm, practical setting. Sunday mornings are the busiest time, when the group meets for the breaking of bread service, which is their weekly communion. As well as the co-op, Spixworth has a few other shops. You have to remember that this village started out as a tiny rural place with very little going on in terms of retail. For a long time it sat under the control of the Long family, who owned almost everything from the late 1600s right up until 1950. Things changed fast after then. The estate was sold, Spixworth Hall came down, and new houses began to appear. The village grew at speed, and because it was turning into a busy base for people working in Norwich, the demand for shops vastly increased. And so, Crostwick Lane became the main spot for shopping. A convenience store opened, then a post office, and other small services followed. Spixworth still relies on Norwich for bigger shopping trips, but Crostwick Lane covers the basics well, thanks to these. Okay, next up we've got a type of hotel. It's the Spixworth Motel. It's the building you can see behind me there. Now this isn't quite the sort of establishment you might expect, and here's why.
Spixworth Motel began life as a private home before two people, Colin Ward and his wife, took it on in 1966. They spent years turning the site into something bigger, and by 1986 it opened as the Spixworth Hotel. The Wards kept expanding the place through the 1990s. In 2002, they added 6 self-catering rooms, which helped the site appeal to long-stay guests. By 2003, the hotel had grown to 35 ensuite bedrooms, plus a bar and restaurant. Not bad for a village hotel, right? It went on the market that year with an asking price of more than £1.25 million. After the sale period, the venue gradually moved away from being a full hotel and became the Spixworth Motel. The focus shifted to simple rooms and self-catering studio flats. Essentially, it turned into a budget-friendly option for tourists visiting Norfolk's attractions. In later years, the motel also took on another role, becoming part of the local safety net. Councils across Norfolk began using it as temporary accommodation when emergency housing was needed. Norwich City Council named it as its main B&B provider for urgent placements. Spending records show Norwich paid the motel £136,000 in 2018 for this service. South Norfolk and Broadland councils also used it, with Broadland spending £26,000 on rooms in the same period. Basically, it became a place people stayed when they had nowhere else to go.
This is Trafford Way I'm standing on the end of here. There's a few names involved with this village. We already know about Greg, of course, and we're going to see another meadow in a moment that's named after a girl called Maisie. But there's two streets I've passed. There's one called James Green Close, and here off Trafford Way there's one called Margaret Dewing Close. I wonder who they were. I've no idea who they were, so maybe if you're a Spixworth local you can fill that in the comments down below. Let's go and see Maisie's meadow. Greg's meadow in the north of the village has a southern counterpart. This here is Maisie's meadow, which was once just a patch of farmland. Hopkins Homes handed it over to the parish council in late 2023 and it was turned into a public space. It was named after a local teenager called Maisie and it opened with a hashtag motto, "Be More Maisie." Now I've no idea who Maisie is or maybe was, but the idea was simple: create a place that felt open, friendly and full of life. People took to it quickly. Work on the site began in early 2024. Volunteers and council staff planted around 1,000 square metres of wildflowers, which helped brighten the whole area. They also planted hundreds of young trees to start building up a small woodland. It's become a place people feel proud of now. Spixworth Village Hall next, which is opposite Maisie's meadow. This opened its doors in 1972. Back then, the village was growing fast, as we know, so this hall was built to keep up with that change. It was a simple building at first, but it could cope with everything happening around it. In the late 1970s, the social club was added next to the hall, giving the site a second building with its own purpose. The two buildings sat side by side and worked well together. More changes followed over the next 2 decades. A main hall extension went up before Room 84 was added in 1984. 5 years later, in 1989, Room 89 was built, along with the parish council office, which sits behind the hall near the play area. Now we have a proper multi-room venue, still at the heart of village activity. And so here's the playing field. This is all land which was once part of the huge Spixworth Hall estate, which stretched across 2,000 acres. Ever since 1969, this relatively small section of the old estate has been for the local people. Once formally handed over, the site could finally be used for sports, meetings and village activities. The next milestone came in 1977, when the site was officially registered with the Charity Commission. This helped protect the land and make sure it would always be used for local benefit. In February 2009, Spixworth Parish Council took over as its sole corporate trustee. The playing field is used for all sorts of sports. The Bowls Club play here, while the massive open space is used for football and casual games. There's something for everyone on this patch. You may have noticed there I caught the allotments. For those of you who've never seen me before, because this is the first episode in the Broadland series, finding the allotments is a running joke, so get used to seeing them. Right, we are now on the North Walsham Road. We're going to be here for a short period. We're right on the border here with the next parish over. We'll be seeing this one later this week. That's not Crostwick, it's Crossick. That's how the Norfolk locals around here pronounce this. It's a tiny village which is sort of just up there. Now, that's for another day. Our next job here in Spixworth is to check out what's behind this hedge, and that would be the St Mary's Care Home.
On the other side of the playing field, we have St Mary's Care Home. This site has been used for healthcare for more than 100 years, even though it may not look like it. It's actually changed purpose several times. It began as a place built to keep people safe from infectious illnesses, then later became a spot where babies were born. Today, it works as a modern care home, but the past still sits behind everything on the site now. The first big chapter began in 1912, when the land this sits on was turned into an isolation hospital. It was built to deal with outbreaks and protect the local area. When the NHS arrived in 1948, it became a maternity hospital. It was always a busy place, no matter what it was dealing with. In 1985, the Simon Northover family took over and began turning the old hospital wards into living spaces. They worked through the buildings one by one, changing the layout so it felt more like a home than a hospital. In 1986, St Mary's opened as a family-run nursing home. Between 1992 and 1994, the whole place was redeveloped. Shared wards were removed, and new ensuite rooms were built to give residents more privacy. When the work finished, the home held a grand reopening in 1994. The most recent change came in 2023, when Kingsley Healthcare took over. They now run a purpose-built 44-bed facility offering dementia care, respite care and residential support. The place has seen a lot of change, but it still plays an important role for local families.
You'll not know this just from viewing that section I've just come through there. I've had to go a little bit off-piste. My route was supposed to go through a gate onto a footpath. The gate was closed and it was locked as well, so I had to go all the way back around the playing field and then via a couple of other streets which I didn't plan to walk down, the ones you've just seen. It's brought us to the same place though, and that would be the Long Arms, which is here.
We've now reached the Long Arms, which is the village's only pub. This predates a lot of Spixworth, built as it was in the early 1930s by Bullard's Brewery. It took its name from the Long family, who had controlled the village for generations. The pub's name actually comes from one specific member of the family, the Reverend John Long, who served as Lord of the Manor in the 1800s. The choice was ironic, as he was known for his strong dislike of public houses. Interestingly, the signboard here doesn't use the real Long family arms, as the family objected to their crest being used for a pub. This gained its provisional licence in May 1932. Bullards even allowed the licence of the Trowel and Hammer at Stoke Ferry to lapse so they could secure this one. At the time, this was a new pub for a village that was just starting to grow. Today, the Long Arms is busy. It serves food and is well known for its Sunday roasts. From its 1932 licence to its modern role, it has stayed a reliable meeting place for this growing commuter village.
And we find ourselves back at the parkland where Spixworth Hall was. Now you can walk down here, there's a permissive footpath, but there's no point us going down there because Spixworth Hall doesn't stand anymore. Here's Amelia to tell you a bit more about it.
So, we've mentioned it a few times, but here's a bit more about Spixworth Hall. It was a huge Elizabethan house built in 1607 by William Peck, who had been both the High Sheriff of Norfolk and Mayor of Norwich. It was one of the grandest houses in the area. Its design followed an E shape with curly gables and a tall porch tower. It sat on land that probably held an older house from the 1400s. For its time, it was a bold, impressive building. It was in 1693 when the Long family bought the estate and made it their home for more than 200 years. The Long family were major landowners, holding several other Norfolk and Suffolk halls, and were known for careers in law and the church. The family went on to control almost the whole village. In the mid-1700s, as powerful as they were, money troubles hit the estate. One story claims that Catherine Long had to cut down a grand avenue of oak trees just to raise funds. That's quite a startling thought, given what you would have found inside the building. This is quite the list, in fact. The Hall's library once held one of the finest collections of first editions in any English stately home, including works by Shakespeare, Dickens, and Cervantes. Records even mention some unusual pets, like a monkey living in the stable block and a bear kept in the butler's cottage and the wine cellar. The estate also held treasures linked to famous names. A Gainsborough portrait of the Long family once hung in the house, painted before the artist's death in 1788. The library also housed the Temple cabinet, filled with Sir William Temple's medals and seals. Also in there was Dorothy Osborne's gold engagement ring, engraved with the line, "The love I owe I cannot show." Temple and Osborne were close friends of the Longs. Spixworth Hall was also known for its folklore. Some say there was a ghostly night watchman who walked the grounds after dark. Others spoke of a phantom horse-drawn hearse that was said to appear at midnight and roll up to the old house. They became part of local talk for years. Until 1787, an alcove in the gallery held what was called the soul of Sir William Peck, bricked up at his own request to protect him from enemies in the afterlife. In all, Spixworth Hall was an amazing building with some very fine elements to it, and several incredible tales. It even hosted some very prominent people. For example, in 1920, Maud and Reginald Gurney of Gurney's Bank rented the house after moving from Earlham Hall. So what happened to Spixworth Hall? Well, after the Second World War, it began to fall apart. The Long family left in 1950, and the building quickly slipped into a bad state. By 1952, it was too far gone to save, and so it was demolished. The loss of the hall marked the end of an era for Spixworth. The land was later sold off and used for new housing. Even though the main hall has vanished, parts of the estate still survive. The old stable block has been turned into holiday cottages. The gatehouse still stands, and the ice house remains tucked away on the grounds. Even the modern Long family are considered to be lords of the manor.
As we wrap up our time in Spixworth, the thing that sticks with you is how much this place has grown. We started in those long sweeps of post-war housing, the estates that turned a tiny rural parish into a proper suburban base for Norwich. Street after street tells the same story. Land once tied to a huge estate now filled with semis, cul-de-sacs and neat modern plots. They are the single biggest force shaping the village we've just driven through. But the older features never really went away. We saw St Peter's with its slim southwest tower, the meadows gifted to the parish, the schools that expanded as the population rose, and the last traces of the great hall that once ruled everything here. Spixworth might look modern at first glance, but the older stories sit just beneath the surface.
By the B1150 is a village proud and strong. It's just north of Norwich where the days speed along. A beck runs beside it with a calm, steady tone, and the hall's old footprint sits quiet in stone. Spixworth Beck keeps rolling on, past the church that still stands tall. 900 years in one place, and the village moves through it all. Spixworth once was the name bed, swine pasture meanings in the sound that it shed. Roger once ruled it when the Normans came through, then Bardolph and Peck shaped the path it laid anew. Spixworth Beck keeps rolling on, past the church that still stands tall. 900 years in one place, and the village moves through it all. Shops line the center where the hall used to be. Schools fill the mornings with a lively energy. Buses head outward towards Walsham each day, and CBS once brought the cheers to the fray. Swart's old fields stay marked on the land. Peck built the hall with a sure, steady hand. Longe keeps the title, though the hall is long gone, but the roots of the village carry on. They carry on. Spixworth stays steady as the beck runs on through, holding its past while it lives something totally brand new. Norfolk skies watch as the daylight is drawn, and the village keeps on rolling on and on and on and on. And on and on and on and on and on. Spixworth Beck keeps rolling on, past the church that still stands tall. 900 years in one place, and the village moves through it all.
Hello folks, welcome back to Broadland for episode number 2. Now I'm beginning this episode on a little green which has the village sign on it. The camera is actually stood on the base of said village sign, and the sign itself is quite nice, but it's what this is stood on which is much more interesting. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. So here's the sign, there it is, backwards way on, but I'll tell you the name of the place if you can't read backwards in a moment. And here's the base of it. That's actually a millstone, and I imagine it's all to do with the former windmill, which we'll see in this episode very shortly. Welcome to the lovely parish of Frettenham. Frettenham, Frethers farmstead. Next up in Broadland, we found our way to Frettenham, about 7 miles north of Norwich. In this one, you start to get an idea of what rural life on the Broads is all about. No disrespect to Spixworth, of course. Here you get a windmill, a school, a pub and a village hall. The name Frettenham goes right back to Old English. Most sources agree it means something like the homestead of a man called Frether, or the settlement of Frethers people. You see this pattern across Norfolk, where early landowners left their names stamped on the map. People have been active around Frettenham since prehistoric days, with finds of flint tools and pottery scattered across the parish. By Doomsday in 1086, it was a small farming settlement held by the Bishop of Thetford. Frettenham's windmill is something everyone knows around here. Built around 1880 for Joshua Harper, it once ground corn for local farms. It lost its sails by 1910 and stood derelict for decades. In 2004, it was restored and turned into a home, complete with a new boat-shaped cap. Frettenham also has a primary school which has taught local children since 1876 and still uses its Victorian classroom. The Rose and Crown pub has traded since the 1700s and once housed drovers heading to Norwich. The village hall and the playing field date from 1973. Frettenham doesn't have ghost stories on every corner, but it does have tales that stick, and the 1988 east window at St Swithin's Church has its own legend-like feel, created by a young artist who learned stained glass on the job and produced something unforgettable. That man was Paul Greener. He arrived as a young man on a manpower services scheme and ended up creating one of Norfolk's most unusual pieces of church art. He later went on to study art and theology. The village hall also has a tale to tell us, that of a wartime crash involving the Belle of Boston, a plane which brought an American aircrew into the village's history. Albert Nix, a survivor of the crash, still has family who visit the memorials. Recent years have seen renewed interest in Frettenham's wartime past, especially with the 2024 unveiling of the new Belle of Boston monument at New Farm Aviation Heritage Museum. It's no surprise really, given local groups keep pushing to protect the parish's heritage. Historically, Frettenham relied on farming, milling and small rural trades. Today, Frettenham Service Station is one of the most active businesses, offering MOTs, repairs and vehicle sales. We'll cover that too. It's a good one, this. Let's get moving.
Amelia's Features.
Good evening, people of Broadland. I'm back again. Today in Frettenham, I'll be telling you all about the incredible Tower Mill that defines this place better than any other landmark. I'll also be on these other things. Enjoy.
Okay, so having driven to our start point, I've come across the little green where the sign and the millstone is, and we're now on Mill Road. We're going to head up towards the mill first. That's going to be our first landmark. Now this walk is basically just going to be around the three sides of a triangle, because if you look at Frettenham on a map, you see it's mainly sort of laid out in this triangular shape. So this is the first road. After the mill, we'll go down the second, and then we'll go down the third to get back to the start. That won't be the entire episode though, because after we've done that walk, there's quite a few bits and bobs of Frettenham which are kind of not within the triangle. One of them is the church, and that'll be the last thing we visit before we move on to the next one. So we better get walking. Let's go and find that mill, shall we?
Norfolk has loads of windmills, as we know, but no video of Frettenham would be complete without a look at this one. Frettenham Windmill stands as a tall, tarred brick tower with 5 floors and a height of 47 feet. It was built in around 1880 for the local farmer and dyer Joshua Harper. Harper ran it as a corn mill. It had a Norfolk boat-shaped cap, 4 patent sails, and a fantail to turn it into the wind. It worked hard for the village until he died in 1891, and the place went up for auction soon afterwards. Alfred Hearn then bought the mill and kept it running until about 1900. After that, things went downhill. The sails and fantail were gone by 1910, leaving the tower looking tired and worn. By 1937, the mill was in a bad way, with no working parts left, though the old cap frame still clung on. It stood like that for decades, slowly aging and gathering dust seemingly. However, in 2004, the tower and its outbuildings were restored and turned into a home. A brand new boat-shaped cap was fitted, bringing back the look of the original mill. Inside, a surprising amount of old machinery survived, including the wooden upright shaft, the great spur wheel, the crown wheel, and 2 pairs of French burr millstones. Between 2011 and 2016, Graham and Suzanne Cottrell owned the mill and added some thoughtful touches. They brought back the 4th original millstone and set it up as a water feature in the garden. They also replaced a modern first-floor door with a pair that matched the oldest photos of the mill. Frettenham used to have more than just this one mill. Long before this one existed, a wooden post mill stood in the area. It appeared on William Faden's 1797 map and was run by farmer and miller William Gedge. That earlier mill faded out of use in the early 1800s, and so this later tower mill is now the only reminder of the village's milling days.
Alright, so we've reached the end of the first road. We're at the first junction where 2 sides of the triangle meet. What do they call the corners of a triangle? Is it vertices? I can try to remember my school days here. I can't remember if it is that or not. Anyway, we're here at the corner. Now there's one major landmark here on every side of the triangle. The mill obviously was on the first one. On this next one, number 2, is the school, because this is School Road. Frettenham Primary School has been teaching the local kids for about 150 years, and it still uses part of its old original Victorian building. Long before the modern school opened, the parish ran a small free school for 10 poor children. That was funded by Chapman's Charity, which ran from around 1660 until 1764. That early school set the tone for what came later. The proper school we know today began in 1876. It opened as a national school to meet the growing need for education in the village. From 1975 onwards, the school needed more room. 3 extensions were added over the last 2 decades to fit new facilities. The site now spreads across 6 buildings, and in 2013 a log cabin was built on the grounds, a rather unique flexible space for lessons, clubs and small groups. Frettenham once had its own primitive Methodist chapel, and it was located in this sort of area I'm showing you now. I wasn't completely sure when I was plotting this route if the chapel still stands or not. This is Frettenham Service Station, which has been around since 1977. It sits on Buxton Road and is still run by the same family as it was when it began. Now into its third generation, the garage handles a long list of jobs. It carries out Class 1 to 7 MOTs, checks engines, fixes gearboxes, and even fits tow bars. It also sells vehicles. Drivers from across Broadland use it because it covers pretty much everything a car might need. That's not bad for a business which began as a small independent setup. In February 2019, it became a limited company. Even with that change, the day-to-day feel stayed the same. Frettenham Service Station is also signed up to several trusted schemes. It's part of the Good Garage scheme, Motor Codes, and Group Auto Care. So you saw on the sign just there that the village hall is also something else that's not within the sort of triangular section here in Frettenham. We're going to head up towards that next, but on the way we're also going to find the local pub. It's called the Rose and Crown.
The Rose and Crown has been part of Frettenham since the 1700s. It began as a coaching pub and later became a spot for drovers heading to Norwich's livestock market. Stockmen even slept in a big upstairs dormitory at one time. For most of its trading years, it was tied to Norwich brewers and breweries. Crawshay and Young's owned it first, then Bullards took it over in 1956. Watney's then arrived in the 1980s. Unlike other rural pubs that vanished under big owners, this one kept going and avoided being shut down. Today, it trades as a proper free house. It relies on wet sales and keeps a good mix of cask and keg beers. It's even added a morning coffee shop and serves weekend breakfasts using meat from Fiddy Butchers. Thai food from Joy Thai Food sometimes appears on an evening. Inside, the pub keeps things simple. It's got wood-panelled walls, pub games, and a real fire. Dogs are welcome too. Visitors walking the Broads often drop in, and locals use it as a relaxed meeting spot. You'll find it at 50 Buxton Road, right next to the village children's park.
So we've seen we've got Frettenham Service Station, but dead opposite the Rose and Crown there's another garage. It's called the Pound Garage. I'm assuming that there was a pinfold there at some point, which is why it's called the Pound Garage. Now there's nowhere to park outside here if you want to use this service, but luckily if you do want to call into the Pound Garage for whatever, there's parking available at the village hall. There's a separate little section of the car park which is reserved purely for their customers. Let's go and find the village hall now, by the way. Frettenham Village Hall and Playing Field was set up in 1973 under a trust deed. It was created to give local people a place for recreation and leisure. The deed was updated in 2002 to sort out new rules and tidy up the paperwork a bit. The playing field offers a big green space for outdoor activities. Local sports club use it, and the primary school also makes good use of it too. The parish council looks after the grounds. They bring in contractors like Norse to keep the grass tidy and the parkland in good shape. Now, Frettenham was the site of a Royal Flying Corps landing ground which operated from 1916 to 1919. It served as an emergency strip and a landing ground for squadrons tasked with intercepting Zeppelins. However, this village hall also has a link to something that happened in World War II, and here's Amelia to tell you a bit about what that was.
The Belle of Boston was a B-24 bomber based at Horsham St Faith during World War II. On the 8th of May 1944, it crashed in Frettenham shortly after takeoff. One engine exploded while the aircraft was loaded with fuel and bombs, leaving the crew with no chance to keep it flying. The bomber was heading for Brunswick on a daylight raid. Lieutenant Paul Kingsley and his crew had only just lifted off when the engine blew. The aircraft lost height fast and hit the road, and open ground in the centre of the village. The impact was devastating. The crash caused a huge fire. Ammunition cooked off, and unexploded bombs lay scattered in the wreckage. Emergency crews had to work carefully to reach survivors. 6 airmen died and 4 lived. One survivor, Albert Nix, owed his life to a brave 14-year-old local boy who pulled him out. Frettenham remembers the crew in 2 places. The village hall has an indoor memorial wall with a brass plaque, photos and recovered parts. It was dedicated in 2004. In 2024, a new outdoor monument was unveiled at New Farm Aviation Heritage Museum. That stands close to the crash site and even includes aircraft pieces and displays. Families of the crew, including relatives of survivor Albert Nix, travelled there from the United States for the ceremony to mark the 85th anniversary of the crash.
Now, also at the village hall, you've got this amazing playing field. The Frettenham Cricket Ground is the actual name of it, and doesn't this look gorgeous? Of course, it's the summer right now, and it's a Saturday today, so I wonder whether there's going to be a cricket fixture on this ground today. Doesn't look very busy at the moment, but you never know. There's nothing wrong with a bit of leather on willow on a nice summer's day. Now, we have one more thing left to do here in Frettenham before we leave it behind. We need to travel along the road, which is outside the village hall here. It takes you up to Frettenham's church, which is a long way from everything, really. It's a fair old way out of the village. So, yeah, let's go and see that's finished.
So our final stop is St Swithin's Church, which is about a mile north of the main Frettenham village. It dates mainly from the 14th century and has a decorated Gothic look. The tower carries a 1672 inscription, and the chancel was rebuilt in 1869. Inside, the church mixes old and new. The place feels packed with details from different ages. You get medieval glass, brass memorials, and 2 unusual fonts. There are rare quatrefoil windows from the early 1300s, and light hits the north wall in bold colours. The east window is the part everyone talks about. It was designed in 1988 by Paul Greener, a young artist on a manpower services scheme. It shows the risen Christ fighting off death, with an angel on one side and a skeleton on the other. Greener and his team also made smaller panels for the chancel windows, including the keys of St Peter and 2 fish. They learned stained glass from scratch, using a kiln bought specially for the job. The work took months and was built partly inside the church itself. The church has been Grade 2 listed since 1961. The churchyard is open, but regular services paused after the pandemic. Sometimes the porch notice board lists where to find the key. Visitors still come to see the medieval features and the bold 1980s artwork that transformed the East End.
Right, that's Frettenham done. Now that sun has got really high in the sky now. We're heading towards the middle of the day. And the great thing about that is that it's gonna make the next one look really, really beautiful. And I know you guys are gonna like this next one because it's got everything that you all love. So I'll see you tomorrow where we put another gorgeous Broadland village on the map. After spending time in Frettenham, you get a real sense of how much this place has done. You've got the windmill standing tall, the school still teaching kids after all these years, and the pub that's kept locals fed and watered since the 1700s. Walking through it, you move from old farmland to wartime history without even noticing the change. One minute you're looking at a millstone in a garden, the next you're reading about where a B-24 came down in 1944. Then you head up the lane and find a church with medieval glass and a bold 1980s window made by a young artist who learned the craft on the spot. These tales and stories all build a picture of a village that's carried its past into the present with relative ease. It's such a great little place.
Frettenham sits where the Norfolk fields meet sky, close to Roxham's water and Norwich nearby. with Harper's Croft and Hearn's work standing by. Oh, Frettenham sits where Norfolk fields meet the sky. It's close to Roxham's water and Norwich nearby. French bird-stones rest where the sparrows fly, and the cap stays bright as the seasons pass by. The mill keeps turning in the village's mind, holding past and present in a single bind. Every step around it feels alive. This is Frettenham Village, one of the friendly kind. St. Swithin's Church is here with its 14th century face. Phipson's touch still sits in each restored place. Alice Thornton's brass keeps its shining grace, and Thomas Drake's tale holds its distant trace. Oh, St. Swithin's Church with its 14th century face has Phipson's touch still there in each restored place. Though Sundays stay closed since a hard-hit phase, the tower still watches all with a timeless gaze. The mill keeps turning in the village's mind, holding past and present in a single bind. Every step around it feels alive. This is Frettenham Village, one of the friendly kind. The old airfield ground stays open and wide, where Royal Flying Corps crews once learned to glide. The village sign holds a millstone set with pride, returned by the Cottrells when they lived inside. Oh, the old airfield ground, it stays open and wide. It's where those Royal Flying Corps learn to glide. Hillside sanctuary cares on the parish side, and census counts climb as new homes go inside. Names on the obelisk stand in the morning light, raised in 1921 in frost cold sight. Cater spoke softly as the day turned bright, and the village keeps those memories tight. The mill keeps turning in the village's mind, holding past and present in a single bind. Every step around it feels aligned. This is Frettenham Village, one of the friendly kind. The mill keeps turning in the village's mind, holding past and present in a single bind. Every step around it feels aligned. This is Frettenham Village, one of the friendly kind. Do 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 bap, the friendly kind.
Hello folks, welcome back to Broadland for episode number 3. Now today I brought you to a village which is kind of tied to another one. There's a river that flows through this place, and one village is on one side, the other village is on the other. We're only doing one of the two villages though on this particular run, because the other one is quite big and it deserves another sort of run to go with it, if you know what I mean. But this village on this side is equally as important and equally as beautiful as well, and you will see when we get to the river itself just how beautiful this place is. This is typical Norfolk Broads country. Welcome to Horstead with Stanninghall. Horstead with Stanninghall, horse place with a hall. Horstead with Stanninghall is next on our Broadland list. This one is situated on the River Bure, shaped by water, old estates and long-gone industry. From mills to malt houses and wartime secrets, this parish has seen a lot and it's kept going. The name Horstead goes right back to the Anglo-Saxons. It derives from the Old English for a horse place. Stanninghall, now a lost village, carries an older meaning too, tied to early families and land. Both existed long before the river trade. People have been active here since ancient times. Trial trenches at Stanninghall Quarry found hazel charcoal with late Bronze Age dates. By 1086, Horstead was a 47-household place held by King William I. The river later turned it into a busy working landscape. That was especially after the Aylsham navigation opened in the 1700s, which transformed it into a heaving behemoth of industry. However, a flood in 1912 smashed that era apart, quite literally in fact. Horstead then settled into quieter rhythms. The landmark that defines Horstead best today is the mill site on the River Bure. One of the biggest and best known mills in Norfolk, it was destroyed by a 1963 fire, but the brick arches still stand and people still gather there. Horstead has plenty more to point out. Horstead Hall once stood grand in the north of the parish, rebuilt in 1835 and later used by a wartime cipher unit. The Italian water tower still rises above the fields. The tithe barn, built between 1600 and 1650, now works as the village hall. Local folklore is quieter here than in some Norfolk parishes, but the one tale everyone seems to know is what happened in 1963 at the mill. It happened in a cold winter when firefighters had to cut holes in thick ice to reach water. Horstead has some links to notable figures, including Edward Harbord, the 3rd Baron Suffield, and Charles Harbord, later the 5th Baron. Sir Edward Birkbeck brought new life to Horstead Hall in the 1800s, hosting big visits, including one from the former Prime Minister Lord Salisbury in 1887. The most active ongoing story is the work at Stanninghall Quarry. It continues to expand into nearby farmland, sending materials across Norfolk as it does. There's also steady interest in the river, the mill arches and the long-term care of the Bure. Work in Horstead has changed many times. The river once powered the mills and the malt houses in Coltishall, and Horstead kept people busy. Today the Horstead Centre is the most active thing, and that has a story all of its own. Let's go!
Hi folks, I'm really looking forward to some bits of this one. I'll be telling you about the River Bure here, which has 2 spots on it that people know. One is the bridge over it into Coltishall. The other is where the mill was.
Okay, so we've made it to the start point here in Horstead, and we're on a residential street to begin with. This isn't anything really much of any note, to be honest with you. But what's at the end of this street, if you turn right, there's plenty there. There's like a gaggle of landmarks to kick us off. One of them is the Horstead Centre. Let's make for that.
In the north of the village to begin with, here we have the site of the former Horstead Hall. It was a grand country house which first went up in the 1600s, but the place changed a lot over time. The first hall dated from around 1620, and that stayed here until the 1800s. when a huge change arrived. In 1835, Edward Harbour, the third Baron Suffield, knocked down the old house and put up a new Tudor-style hall. He planned it for his son, Edward Vernon Harbord, who had just married a woman known only as Miss Gardiner. However, the third Baron died in a riding accident on the wedding day, so the house was changed for the Dowager Baroness instead. It was a sad twist, but it shaped how the hall was used for years thereafter. As we know, men and women had different needs back then. Charles Harbord, later the 5th Baron Suffield, grew up at Horstead Hall before moving to Gunton Park. After that, the estate was rented out until the Birkbeck family bought it. Sir Edward Birkbeck made the place busy again, with Jersey cattle, smart grounds, and big visits. Even the former Prime Minister, Lord Salisbury, came by in 1887, which says a lot about how lively the place once felt. During World War II, the hall was taken over by the War Office and used by a cipher unit. Huts went up all over the grounds, and some still stand today. After the war, the hall fell into decline, and most of it was pulled down in the 1950s. The estate was sold in 1947, and the grand house never returned to its old life. Today, only parts of Horstead Hall survive. A few estate buildings remain, along with a derelict chapel and a tall Italianate water tower. This is the Horstead Centre, which is a busy residential activity base for kids and young people. It's the only Church of England centre of its kind in the whole country, which makes it feel pretty special. Schools, youth groups and charities come here for short stays packed with outdoor fun. The site has a long past, starting with old priests' houses that stood here from at least 1564. The main building today is an old rectory from the 1700s and early 1800s. A trust deed set the place up in 1969, and it became a charity in 1970. Inside, groups can stay in dorm rooms, with space for around 60 people at a time. There are lounges, a games room, a big dining room, and a kitchen that holds a 5-star food hygiene rating. The whole place aims to feel warm and homely. As for the activity list, well, this is the Broads, so, as you might expect, it's long and packed with action. On land, groups can try archery, bushcraft, climbing, crate stacking, a vertical challenge and low ropes. Out on the river, they can paddle canoes, build rafts, or try stand-up paddleboards. The centre's mission is to provide opportunities for young people to grow their physical, social, intellectual, and spiritual sides while staying safe and supported. Every activity is planned with that in mind. Most leave happier than when they arrived.
Right, so before you've got time to breathe, you're then at the next landmark, which is this behind me. That's the tithe barn.
Another interesting building close by is the Horstead Tithe Barn. This is an old agricultural building that has stood here since the 1600s, and it still looks solid and impressive today. It was built during a period when big storage buildings were needed for farm produce. It's got thick walls and strong materials that could handle heavy loads. Back then, it sat at the heart of local farming work. Everything brought in from the fields had to pass through its doors at some point. Its design mixes carstone, clunch and brick, which gives it a look you don't see everywhere. The barn had a very clear job in the past. It was used to store tithes, which were 1/10 of the crops taken from local farms as a type of rent or church tax. Farmers brought grain, hay and other produce here, and the rector's staff kept it safe until it was needed. Today, it's got a different job. As the years moved on, the barn stopped being used for farm storage and even stood empty for a while before plans were made to bring it back to life. Now, it's the village hall, and it plays a lively part in local life.
So you probably could tell that the tithe barns had an extension built at the front, the oldest part you can see at the back here. And if you go round the back of the tithe barn, you're then faced with All Saints Church, just here.
All Saints Church is one of the first things you notice as you head south through the village. It looks old at first glance, but most of what you see today was rebuilt in Victorian times. only the tower is truly medieval, and it stands out straight away. The first church here was built in the early 1300s, with a few bits that may be even older. The West Tower is the main survivor from that time, with its flint walls and its reticulated tracery. By the 1600s, the rest of the church was in poor shape, and by the 1860s, it was unsafe. So, in 1879, Richard Phipson rebuilt almost everything except the tower, and the church took on the look it has today. Phipson used clever roof levels and neat details to make the church feel like a cluster of small buildings. The cost of the rebuild was surprisingly low for such a big job. Inside, only a few older pieces remain, like the 14th century south doorway and what might be the original door. There are also memorials from the 1600s and 1700s, including a grand 1744 monument to John Langley Watts. The stained glass is one of the best things here. The most famous window is by Edward Burne-Jones from the 1890s, showing courage and humility. The east window, by Kemp and Company from 1912, includes Julian of Norwich and Herbert de la Zinga.
Okay, so now it's time to make our way down towards the river, although between here and the river there's quite a lot to talk about. First thing I want to mention actually is this very road, because I think this is the old road. I think the road through Horstead now has been sort of straightened, aligned a bit more, and I think this road is the old loop where the church once sat. We're going to follow this old loop, and it'll take us past a few bits and bobs before we reach the river. The first thing it will take us past is just here. It's the allotments. Right, let's see some more mundane stuff now as we head towards the River Bure. First on that list is something which definitely isn't mundane for certain members of my viewership. Stand up and be counted, you allotment lovers. This one's for you. Next, we have Horstead's local surgery, which to me looks like it's based in some sort of old pub or maybe a hotel of some kind. What do you reckon? I can't say I found anything about this or its previous role, but if it was a pub, it is no longer. There is one just up the way though. This is the Recruiting Sergeant, a well-known 18th century pub and restaurant that pulls in visitors from all over Broadland. The building has a 16th century core, and these days it's most famous for food. Today it's owned by Colchester Inns, who also run the Rising Sun in Coltishall. Under their care, the pub has won awards such as Broadland Pub of the Year. The pub's name comes from its old job. Back in the 1700s and 1800s, the building was used by the British Army to sign up new soldiers. Men would come here, meet the recruiting sergeant, and join the forces. The first known landlord was Roger Fearman, who ran the place from 1726 to 1737. The building itself is Grade 2 listed and built with colour-washed brick and flint. That's a classic Norfolk look. It survived damage during World War II, but it stayed standing. Horstead, along with neighbouring Coltishall, sit at what was once the busy top end of the River Bure, acting as inland ports for the area. Boats came and went all day, carrying grain, malt and supplies. Coltishall handled most of the malting work, while Horstead dealt with transport and milling. In the 1700s and early 1800s, the two villages were packed with staithes, quays and storage yards. Grain arrived from farms, was processed and then loaded onto Norfolk wherries. Coltishall alone had at least 9 malt houses, which made it a serious player in the trade. Horstead had at least one malt house of its own, and it was located here. Barley malt from here travelled downriver to Great Yarmouth and then out to places like Ireland and the Netherlands. The malting trade eventually ran into trouble. There's no malting happening in Horstead now. Okay, so just after that malt house, there's a double bridge which crosses the River Bure, and basically one's for traffic, the other one's for pedestrians. I'm stood on the pedestrian bridge here, and this is my view. There's the River Bure. Let's talk about this.
Now, we're on a bridge over the River Bure. As you can see, the river below us looks quite calm. But when the malt houses were around, it was anything but. The River Bure was far busier after the Aylsham navigation opened in 1779. Engineers cut new channels and added locks so boats could travel upstream. At one point, up to 26 wherries worked this stretch, carrying coal, grain and goods along the river, but they had to deal with tight bridges and 5 locks between Coltishall and Aylsham. The navigation suffered a huge blow in August 1912 when a massive storm hit the region. More than 8 inches of rain fell in a day, and the rivers burst their banks. One of the locks collapsed, and the Coltishall Road Bridge was swept away. The damage was so bad that repairs were impossible. Whilst the navigation was lost, the bridges simply had to be rebuilt. The main road bridge between Coltishall and Horstead, which we're on now, replaced the earlier timber bridge destroyed in the 1912 flood. It remains the only major crossing point between the two villages. The Aylsham navigation is long gone, but groups like the Bure Navigation Conservation Trust work hard to keep its past remembered. The river may be calmer now, but its past was full of movement, trade and hard work. It's not something you easily forget.
So we've mentioned already that the river floods, and I've got a bit of proof of that. When I was walking down to the river from the recruiting sergeant, I passed this house, which is behind the camera now. On its wall on the outside, you can see there's a little plaque, and it says, flood level, August 1912. Can you imagine the flood being that high? That's up to my knees, that is, that line. That is some serious flooding. Right, so we've made our way back to the recruiting sergeant. We're going to cross the road now, because over the road we've got Randall's Foot Care, which is this big building here. There's also somewhere over here a bowls club, hopefully. I can't see it, but it's there somewhere. Ah, I've found the bowls club. Now the piece I wrote about this will have to be ditched, because this looks like it's not in use anymore. What a shame to see the bowling club be left abandoned. But that's where it is, right next to Randall's Foot Care. It's not been used for a number of years, that you can tell just by looking at the grass, how overgrown it is. It's quite sad, that, really. Next we have a small playground on Mill Road. This isn't anything special, but hey, the local kids need a place to play, right? Let's wander down Mill Road a bit further, because in a moment we'll be at Horstead's best known spot. This is the mill house, which has a past that stretches back hundreds of years. It was the manor house for the old mill site, and it still keeps that link today, despite the fact that the mill is no longer standing. More on that shortly. The house dates from around 1620. It's got flint walls, brick details, and unusual curved gables. The land around the mill house goes right back to Saxon times. St Benet's Abbey owned the site for a long time until Henry VIII took it during the dissolution. He handed it to King's College, Cambridge, who kept it for nearly 400 years. King's College finally sold the mill house and the mill in 1910, ending their long ownership. One of the rarest details of this is a witch's window set beside the chimney. It's a quirky feature you don't see every day. This is, rightly, a Grade 2 listed building. So I'm sure you'll have gathered we're back at the river, and there's a little weir there, and there's some seriously strong undercurrents. You probably saw and heard the water rushing down through that little culvert. Now what it's doing is it's rushing under the remains of Horstead Mill, and that is what this structure is here. Now we're going to go around the other side of this so we can see it from the other side, and I'll show you exactly what it's like. I could, if there weren't nettles, venture into it and show you the insides of it, but I don't really want to be walking through those, so we'll go around there and we'll get a better look.
So here we have the site of Horstead Mill on the River Bure, a known beauty spot to many today. This used to be the beating heart of the village's agricultural operation. Indeed, it was one of the biggest and best known mills in Norfolk, and people loved taking photos of it. The mill stood 3 stories high with white weatherboarding and brick arches below. It worked for hundreds of years before a huge fire in 1963 destroyed almost everything. You might not initially realise it, but the site once held 2 mills side by side. One was a grist mill for grinding corn, and the other was a fulling mill for thickening wool cloth. The fulling mill became worn out and stopped working in the 1700s. Records from 1809 even called it ancient and dilapidated. The corn mill carried on and became the main working mill on the Bure. It had 6 brick arches, overhanging gables and 2 power sources. One was an older undershot wheel and the other was a later turbine. Wherries came up the Aylsham navigation to load and unload goods using the Lucums on the gables. When King's College sold off the land in 1910, a Norwich miller bought it. The mill then moved from flour to animal feed, although the old machinery stayed in use until the 1912 flood damaged the navigation and cut off easy river transport. It briefly returned to flour in 1915, but after the First World War, it went back to animal feed. By the late 1950s, only the turbine was still running the mixing machinery. The end came during one of the coldest winters on record. When the fire broke out, firefighters had to cut holes in thick ice to reach water. The mill was gutted, and the wooden structure was demolished soon after. Today, only the brick arches remain, but the site is still one of the most recognisable spots on the Bure.
It's absolutely beautiful, isn't it? Even though the mill has disappeared, the river here is still gorgeous. Right, we have only a handful of things left to do here in Horstead. One of them is to go and see the War Memorial, so we'll make for that next. Horstead War Memorial now, which is on the village green where Norwich Road meets Mill Road. It's a Grade 2 listed limestone cross that remembers local men who never came home from the 2 world wars. It sits in a small open spot that people pass every day. After the First World War, a village committee met in November 1920 to decide what kind of memorial they wanted. They chose a design by an architect called Horseman, who suggested a Latin cross bottonet under a neat gabled canopy. The memorial was ready by October 1921. The village had a friendly debate about where it should stand. Some wanted it in the churchyard, while others preferred the green. The green won in the end, and the memorial was placed here. It stayed in this spot ever since, watching over the crossroads. Leaving the village means passing 2 more things of note. Here we have the Horstead Water Tower, which is one of the most unusual structures in the Norfolk Broads. It was built in the 1960s or early 1970s and was designed to avoid the usual tin-on-legs look. Instead, it has a bold, geometric shape that people often compare to a snowflake. The tower is almost unique in the UK. Only one other water tower shares this exact design, and that one stands in Arkley, Greater London. Although the tower's shape was inspired by a snowflake, some people think it also looks a bit like an Indian elephant column. Whatever you see in it, the design stands out from every angle. It holds a huge amount of water, serving the growing needs of the area during the mid-20th century. And lastly, we have Stanninghall Quarry. This sits just south of Horstead and has been worked for years as a major sand and gravel site. It's run by Tarmac and it's grown bit by bit into nearby farmland. The quarry sends materials across Norwich and the rest of Norfolk. Archaeologists have found very small but interesting traces of very early life on this site. Trial trenches uncovered hazel charcoal with late Bronze Age dates and a few early pottery pieces. Nothing huge, but enough to show people were active here long before this quarry arrived. The land around the quarry has links to the deserted medieval village of Stanninghall. The village was listed in the Domesday Book and later saw its fields turned over to sheep grazing. Now the village is long gone, but the name lives on through the quarry and some nearby farms. Our time in Horstead and Stanninghall leaves a clear picture of how the River Bure has affected almost everything here, from the Saxon mill site recorded in the Domesday Book to the later wherries that once crowded the Aylsham navigation. Even now, the brick arches of the old mill stand as a reminder of that long story. Walking further, the layers keep stacking up. Horstead Hall brings in the Suffields, the Birkbecks, and the wartime cipher huts that still linger in the grounds. The tithe barn, built between 1600 and 1650, now works as the village hall. All Saints keeps its medieval tower and Burne-Jones window. And Stanninghall adds the note of a lost village. The river is calmer now, the malt houses are gone, and the mill no longer turns, but Horstead is still amazing.
Horstead sits north of Norwich town. Its villages side by side. Old names speak of horses kept and stands folk far and wide.
Doomsday mark the household set where Taverham fields still lie.
The river Bure keeps rolling on where the mill once turned nearby.
But did bum hey.
Horstead with Stanninghall-stands, where past and present blend.
Passing roads connect the ground that locals still defend.
Time moves on, but
Marks remain around each bend.
Horstead with Stanninghall-stands, where memories never end. Horstead Hall of 1835 has a stately frame.
Suffield walked its rooms before the wartime cipher game.
Stanninghall recalls the days the sanatorium came.
Mosquito crews honored still, each name a lasting flame. But bum hey.
Horstead with Stanninghall-stands,
Where past and present blend.
passing roads connect the ground.
That locals still defend.
Time moves on, but
Marks remain around each bend. Horstead with Stanninghall-stands.
where memories never end. All Saints with its tower high and 14th century grace.
Phipson's work restored the walls that still hold every trace.
Queen Anne's arms above the nave remain in pride of place.
The memorial cross stands for those of this small space.
Maiden Bridge awaits the night when May brings tales once more.
Sir Thomas drives his carriage past as shadows cross the shore.
Horstead with Stanninghall stay strong through every year.
Past and present walk as one, and both remain held near. Horstead with Stanninghall-stands,
Where past and present blend.
passing roads connect the ground that locals still defend. Time moves on, but
Marks remain around each bend.
Horstead with Stanninghall-stands.
Where memories never end. Hey, Horstead!
The memories never end.
Hello people, welcome back to Broadland again for the 4th episode in this series. Now earlier this week we saw the rather big village of Spixworth, didn't we? And there was one point where I walked all the way to the edge of Spixworth and onto the sort of boundary between that one and this one. You might remember its name. If you don't, I'll tell you it again. It's Crostwick. Crostwick, Cross Farm. Alright, we have 2 more Broadland ones to cover this week, and both of them are really small. Strangely though, here in Crostwick there's a lot to talk about. Most people pass through without realising how much actually sits here. That's the downside of the B1150. The name Crostwick goes right back to the Viking era. It's thought to come from Old Norse, with parts of the name meaning something like cross farm or cross settlement. This is one reason why the locals call it Crostwick, not Crostwick. Crostwick sits close to areas shaped by peat digging from the 12th to 14th centuries. The marsh beside the village came from those old pits filling with water. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the land was drained and fenced for grazing. Whilst the marsh is definitely a feature here, the White Horse is what steals the show. That's a pub which goes back to at least 1728 and sits right beside the B1150. Drovers, farmers and travellers stopped there for generations. The outside looks deceivingly quiet. Inside it's packed with trinkets, brewer bits and even a full suit of armour. It was the pub too where Sir Alfred Munning stayed here in 1904 and painted nearby scenes. The place is nearly always busy, with walkers, locals and guests filling the rooms. Crostwick has other well-known spots too. St Peter's Church stands hidden in trees with a tower from the 1400s and a medieval St Christopher painting inside. The old school from 1850 still stands on North Walsham Road, whilst a war memorial sits on a footpath nearby. Local folklore in Crostwick tends to centre on the marsh. Some say the marsh has its own moods, especially when the mist rolls in from the beck. There are also old stories about travellers hearing hooves on the old country lanes long after the drovers stopped using them. Munnings is the best known name linked to this one, but inside St Peter's you'll also find a link to Sarah Trimmer, the early writer of children's books. Her relative Eliza Willett is remembered on a memorial plaque inside the church. Recent news in Crostwick has mostly focused on the old Rectory Hotel. In late 2025, Norfolk businessman Marcus Piercy bought the place and spoke warmly about taking it on. The old school also made headlines when it sold at auction in 2022 after years of wear. Today, the pub and the old Rectory Hotel are the main employers, along with small businesses in and around the village. Some residents work in Norwich, which is only a short drive away. And there aren't many residents here. Let's see how small this really is.
Amelia's features.
Hello everyone. It's really important to not mispronounce this little place. Crostwick is the right way to say it, even though it's spelt Crostwick. It has a lot to talk about too, as you can see. The White Horse at Crostwick goes back to 1728. This was a place where drovers and farmers stopped here on their way through the Broads to North Walsham or to Norwich. The pub was once tied to Chapman Ives Coltishall Brewery. Later it moved into the hands of Bullards. Watney Man took it on after that. Each owner left a mark, but the place kept its old feel. Step inside it today and it feels packed with life. Trinkets hang from beams and walls. Old brewer bits sit beside some odd items like a full suit of armour, for example. There's so much to see in here that reviews often refer to it as having an Aladdin's cave. I mean, it's not wrong, but let's not forget it's a pub too. Sitting just off the B1150, it has rooms for guests and sits close enough to the Broads to entice people in. Real ales, simple food, and a steady stream of walkers keep it lively. It is nearly always full, which says plenty. This pub is best known for its link to Sir Alfred Munnings, who stayed here in 1904. He painted scenes of the area while based at the pub. One piece shows a woman, a donkey, some geese, and a white horse on a small rise. People say he could paint horses like no other. Crostwick Marsh is arguably the hidden treasure of this little village. The marsh, which sits beside the village to the north, covers 29 acres. It once held peat pits and grazing fields. Now it is watched over with strict rules. Back in the 12th, 13th and 14th centuries, people were digging here. Workers cut deep pits for peat. Water filled the gaps and left wet ground behind. Later, in the 18th and 19th centuries, the land was fenced and drained. Cattle fed on the fresh grass. Today, The marsh is a protected site. It sits inside the Broad Special Area of Conservation and also forms part of a Ramsar site and a special protection area. The whole place is treated with care by local groups. The marsh sits in the valley of Crostwick-Beck. It's a small stream that runs into the River Bure. The ground here mixes damp grass, tall fen, rich fen grass, alder trees, scrub, and dikes. It is packed with bird life in spring and summer.
I think at the end of this episode, people, you're all going to be having the song stuck in your head because it's quite a good one. I think it's a really nice song, but we'll see at the end, won't we? Right, now we've driven down from the pub and we've found our way to a lay-by, which is on the main North Walsham Road. Really the only place to park here, to be honest with you, because this place is so small it doesn't really have any side streets that I can put the car in, so that lay-by is about my only option. It's okay though, because it's handily positioned. It's right next to a street called Common Loke, which I'm going to make my way up towards a footpath that runs past the church and then into past the school, should I say, and then into the churchyard, and then we'll complete the route by coming back down North Walsham Road. This should not take me all that long, fingers crossed. The old Croswick School was built in 1850 by Reverend E.J. Bell. It sat on North Walsham Road and taught around 60 kids when it was full. It served the village for over 100 years, but by 1955 the doors had closed for good. After closing, the place sat empty. Later it was rebuilt and turned into a 2-floor building. For a time it even worked as a veterinary practice. However, by the early 2000s the place was worn out. The building needed work and slipped into a rough state. It stayed that way for a while. In 2022, the building went to auction. It sold for £157,000. Full planning permission was granted soon afterwards, with the aim of bringing this lovely old Victorian place back into life as a home. So I have to be honest with you here, just outside the school, it does feel very private, but you're actually all right here because the footpath literally skirts the edge of that building. There is a gate that says private land off to the left. Don't go through there. Even though you can see the church, that's not the way you go to get to the church. What you've got to do is you've got to continue along here, take a right turn, and then right turn again, and you find yourself in the churchyard. And guess what? That's where we're going now.
St Peter's Church dates from the 1400s. It sits hidden within some trees off the North Walsham Road. The church stands on an older site. The place was heavily rebuilt in Victorian times, but this still keeps some older touches. Records say the north porch was paid for in around 1504. The tower stands tall in the perpendicular style. It is, without doubt, the strongest older part left. It has sound holes with neat tracery, and a top edge lined with small stone points. Victorian workers changed a lot inside. They replaced most windows and added a new font. A carved rood screen went in too. Even with all that work, one thing stayed put: a medieval St. Christopher painting on the south wall. The chancel holds bright stained glass. One panel was made by William Wales in 1853. It was fixed up again in 1989 by the King Workshop. The colours still stand out today and light up the space beautifully. A memorial inside this one remembers a lady called Eliza Willett. Born in Ipswich, she was a relative of Sarah Trimmer, a writer from the 1700s. Trimmer helped shape early children's books, wrote reviews, and set out what kids' books could be. She kept track of the first big titles.
I'm going to be totally honest with you here. This place does feel a bit like the land that time forgot, because, you know, to get to the church, it's quite a difficult thing to do. When you get there, it's all overgrown, and then when you come out of the church via this path here, you're coming through trees and things. It's almost like nothing is used anymore around here. but it is in use. It's just not very well known, I suppose. Right, our next job is to make our way to the North Walsham Road. So we've got to walk through these woods a bit more, through these trees up here. That path runs to the North Walsham Road. We'll turn back on ourselves and then come along the road which runs down there. There are two more things to see. One is a war memorial, the other one is a hotel. The Crostwick-Beeston St Andrew War Memorial dates from around 1920. It stands as a wheelhead cross made from tough grey granite. It marks the lives of 6 men from the First World War and 2 from the Second. You can find it on the eastern side of the North Walsham Road. It sits on a footpath between Rackheath Road and the old White Horse pub. It's easy to miss unless you know where to look. This spot is calm and relatively tucked away. The old rectory is dead opposite that memorial. It began life in the mid-1700s, built as the home for the local clergy. Over time it moved into private hands and took on a new role. These days it's a hotel, which began when the Solomon family owned the place. Now the grounds cover 3.5 acres. Guests can enjoy a pergola, a gazebo, a fountain and even a heated pool here. The hotel has 16 rooms. Some sit in the main house and some in a cottage across the garden. All of the rooms have simple comforts and breakfast is part of the stay. In late 2025, Marcus Piercy bought the hotel. As a well-known Norfolk businessman, he already owns several businesses across the county. He spoke warmly about taking it on and praised the team. He said following his purchase he plans to keep building the place up with care and energy. Okay, you see what I mean now about not being able to park anywhere else apart from in this lay-by. Handily placed though, to be honest with you. We're back in it and we've made our way around Croswick. It is one of those little out-of-the-way places, isn't it? But once you sort of dig around it, you do realise there's quite a lot more to it than you might think. A lot of this traffic passing me here on the road probably won't even know about half of what I've just covered there. So, now you do. Time to move on to the next one. Leaving Croswick behind, I think today we've visited a place that punches far above its size. It's the sort of place where you only need an hour or maybe less to look around, but you end up staying longer because there's always one more thing to notice. Thinking back over the landmarks, each spot plays its part. The White Horse pulls you in first with its long past and packed walls. The marsh sits just beyond, full of bird life and old peat pits. St Peter's hides in the trees with its tower and its medieval painting. So, as we head out, Croswick feels like a place that rewards anyone who slows down long enough to look. Not many people do, that's the trouble. You should though, because you get history, nature, old Norfolk buildings, and a real Aladdin's cave to explore in the pub.
Croswick sits where the crossroads meet, west of Wroxham's winding street. North of Norwich the fields stay wide, old Norse roots in the name still guide. Doomsday counts just 14 homes, shared by lords with distant thrones. Now the B1150 keeps its flow, carrying life as the engines go. Croswick, 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 don't mispronounce that name. It's Croswick, not Crostwick, so the locals say.
once filled the night. Decoy fires gave a false red light, keeping Horsham St. Faith concealed. Danger turned toward the dummy field. St. Christopher walks on the painted wall. Victorian work still frames it all. A carved font stands with careful grace, holding its mark in this quiet place. Croswick, 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 don't mispronounce that name. It's Croswick, not Crostwick, so the locals say. Broadland shapes the village choice. Jerome Mayhew speaks for the wider land. Names of the fallen carved in stone, while the wheel cross sits where passers stand. Croswick, 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 don't mispronounce that name. It's Croswick, not Crostwick, so the locals say. Croswick, 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 don't mispronounce that name. It's Croswick, not Crostwick, so the locals say. Croswick stands with its past held near. Croswick moves through another year. Croswick has a gentle flow under the tower on the North Walsham Road.
Hello folks, welcome back to Broadland again for the last one in this first initial run. Now you saw Croswick yesterday, and if you thought that place was small, you haven't seen anything yet. This one is absolutely minuscule. In fact, it's one of those places where you could basically walk it within 10 minutes if you knew what you were doing. But there's a bit more to it than just the walk, in fact, because sort of running to the north of it, there's a big major road. We definitely need to cover that as well. And there's also a garden centre here too. This is Beeston St Andrew. Beeston St Andrew, bent grass farmstead with St Andrew's Church. Finally this week we're in Beeston St Andrew, just 3.5 miles northeast of Norwich. This one is tiny, extremely rural and easy to miss, yet it carries a long backstory for such a small place. It has old fields, a handful of houses and a couple of long driveways. Beeston comes from Old English for a farmstead where bent grass grows. The St Andrew part links to a medieval church that once stood here. That church faded away a long time ago, but the name stuck. Even if the physical traces of that church have thinned out over time, Beeston is still here in a much reduced form. Human activity in this area goes back far earlier than the medieval period. Flint tools, a Mesolithic axe, Bronze Age roundhouses and a ring ditch spotted from the air all point to deep roots. The Domesday Book recorded a settlement with a church and some farmland. Later centuries brought decline as people moved into Norwich. By the 1600s, the church was already in ruins, and by the 1800s the village still existed on paper but had almost no residents left. Today, the place most people associate with Beeston St Andrew is the present Beeston Hall. Rebuilt in 1897, it stands at the end of one of those long drives. It has curving red brick garden walls from the 1600s and 1700s which wrap around parts of the grounds. Redhall Farm, now a private estate, occupies the site of the older Beeston Hall, which dated back to the early 1600s. In all, when you visit Beeston, you don't seem to be getting much for your money. You have to look northwards for that. Sweeping through the parish to the north is the Broadland Northway, a modern feature that's changed how people reach this area. Beeston Garden Centre sits just to the south of that road, drawing steady traffic thanks to its position near a roundabout. Current news tends to revolve around the roads, in fact. The Broadland Northway remains a talking point, especially after its Western Link plan was withdrawn in 2025. The garden centre also has expansion plans, which included a push for more parking spaces. Famous residents are pretty much non-existent for this one. It's far too small. The Micklethwaite family, however, left a strong mark. They owned much of the land for generations and shaped the estate layout that still defines the area. Of course, farming was the main employer here. Redhall Farm once ran as a dairy operation, and the surrounding fields supported small agricultural jobs. The garden centre is the closest thing to a local workplace now, having grown rapidly since the lockdown years.
Amelia's features.
Good evening, folks. It's the last one of the working week for you today, and I have two main things to cover. One of them is the Broadland Northway, and the other is the garden centre. Andy's on the rest. If you're driving into Beeston these days from Croswick, that means you have to pass over the A1270, Broadland Northway. We're going to drive along it for a short stretch so we can fill in how this road became one of the area's biggest features. When it was built, it changed the whole area in one go. Work kicked off in 2016, and by April 2018, the full road was open. It soon acquired the name Broadland Northway, even though loads of folks call it the Norwich Northern Distributor Road, or NDR for short. Before the diggers rolled in, archaeologists had a field day out here. They found Middle Saxon iron pits dating from around 650 AD to 850 AD. No one expected that. It added a whole new bit of early Norfolk history to the mix, all because the road needed building. The road itself is 12.4 miles long. It loops around the north and east of Norwich and cost £205 million to build. The idea was to ease traffic and help new housing and business plans. People had wanted this northern route for years. A survey in 2003 had big support for it. There is still a missing bit. The road stops at the A1067. The original plan was to push it to the A47 in the west, and that idea was termed the Norwich Western Link. It keeps hitting problems though. In January 2025, the planning bid was officially pulled after some environmental objections. Just south of the Broadland Northway is Beeston Garden Centre and Farm Shop, just off the B1150. This began in 1990 as E.F. Dewing's farm shop in Hainford. Over time, it grew into a bigger food and plant spot, and now trades as Beeston Garden Centre and Farm Shop Limited. The place really took off during the COVID lockdown. We all know how that affected businesses, but some thrived thanks to it. Loads of new customers turned up here for plants and local food in that weird time. Manager at the time, Robert Sherwood, had to keep things moving as demand shot up. That rush pushed plans for a bigger setup, and the team saw a chance to grow. Most plants on sale were still outside or in polytunnels, but a new building was proposed to fix that, some 4 times the size of the farm shop. A lot of customers stuck with this place after lockdown. In fact, it's fair to say that countrywide, a lot of people spend more time in their gardens now, which is one reason why this place is still doing so well, but it's not the only one. The Broadland Northway, or NDR, has helped too. Cars slow down near the roundabout, so the place is easy to spot. That easy access is one reason why, a couple of years ago, Beeston Garden Centre applied to increase their parking spaces from 30 to 67.
Okay, so from the garden centre you go about quarter of a mile, maybe half a mile down the road, and you come to this crossroads here where you find these houses. Now these houses are on the edge of a farm track. Redhall Farm is up there. We'll talk about that in a moment. The name of this road, by the way, is Beeston Lane, and the majority of Beeston St Andrew is down here to the left hand side. Now I just want to make a point before I go any further here, right? This road is no vehicles except for access. That does not mean that vehicles are not allowed down there. It's still a public road, which is why I have driven down there and walked all the way back to this end. Basically, all we're going to do is we're going to walk from here back to the other end of Beeston St Andrew, past Beeston Hall. Perfectly legal before anyone says anything, because pedestrians are allowed down here. So if anyone wants to come at me about that, then feel free, because I'll win. I know my rights. So, here we go. Let's begin here at Redhall Farm. Beeston is one of the smallest villages anywhere close to Norwich. Very few people live here, and those that do all have some sort of link to farming. This here is the entrance to Redhall, a private estate which once ran as a dairy farm. Nowadays, a large high-end country home, the grounds stretch out across old farmland. The area around it goes back a long way. Digs have found Bronze Age roundhouses and uncovered Middle Saxon iron smelting sites. People were busy here long before the farm existed. Redhall Farm stands on the site of Beeston Old Hall. It was an older house dating to the early 1600s. The current red brick farmhouse came later, taking over as the main home and becoming the centre of a big agricultural estate. So, is there a village here? Well, not really, no. Not now, anyway. Beeston St Andrew was once a small medieval place which faded away as people later moved into the city. Only traces remain today of that old village. The manor here was linked to the Micklethwaite family. Their old hall stood until 1846. It was then taken down and a new hall took its place. If you walk up the road from Redhall Farm eastwards, you soon come to that newer hall. The present Beeston St Andrew Hall was rebuilt in 1897 and it still stands in its original form today. Some garden walls on its grounds are older. They date back to the 1600s and 1700s, curving around parts of the site. Beyond this big building, Beeston only has a handful of houses. Let's continue on. Beeston's name comes from Old English. It means a farmstead where bent grass grows. That's an unusual one. The St Andrew part comes from an old church which was mentioned in the Domesday Book but later vanished when the village emptied. Bits of rubble and tiles have been found in fields, presumably from that old building. It's not all that's ever been found out here either. Flint tools have been discovered, a Mesolithic axe was one of them. A single Saxon brooch has been recovered from here too, dating to the 900s. The likes of human bones have even turned up in ploughed soil. Maps and overhead imagery also help us here. A ring ditch spotted once from the air may mark a Bronze Age mound. A couple of crop marks might also be enclosures. They all hint at life before the village faded away. And there you go, folks. There's not much more to Beeston St Andrew, and that's it for the first run here in Broadland. I'll be back again soon, but it won't be this year. I might come back next year, you know. I think Beeston St Andrew leaves you with a strange mix of scale and depth. It's tiny on the map, yet the ground carries thousands of years of activity, from flint tools to Saxon finds to the Doomsday entry that fixed its name in writing. The Micklethwaites shaped the estate, the vanished church left only fragments, the garden centre brought new life during lockdown. Even the roadworks have added their own twist with those unexpected Saxon pits. So when we look back on our time in Beeston St Andrew, it feels like we've stepped through several versions of the same place. It's a medieval village that faded, but it's also a farming patch that kept going. Although nudged by new roads and new visitors, this one somehow sticks with you.
Where the fields stay wide and green, Bessetuna lives in records old, with the church once clearly seen. St. Benet's monks hold all the ground in the days the scribes describe, a tiny place that still remains where the past and present collide. Beeston St Andrew stands on the hill, though the hall is gone and the church lies still. Beeston's small, but its roots run deep, a tiny village, but one that refuses to sleep. Folk drifting towards Norwich streets as the village thins away. By the late 1600s, only ghosts seem left to stay. The church falls down, stones sink under the grass that hides the frame, yet the name stays firm in the record still, holding tight to its claim. Beeston St Andrew stands on the hill, though the hall is gone and the church lies still. Beeston's small, but its roots run deep, a tiny village, but one that refuses to sleep. Old hall stands in 1610 with its brickwork bold and bright. Micklethwaite acres stretch around in the mid-Victorian light. Red walls stay on with urns above, where the sun still casts its glow, and Flint axe heads rise in the fields nearby. Cotton ages long ago. Beeston St. Andrew stands on the hill, though the hall is gone and the church lies still. Beeston's small, but its roots run deep. A tiny village, but one that refuses to sleep.
Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.